All right, let's start. So today we are going to solve a paper. This is October, November 2018, paper 2. And the question that we are going to solve is a database related question that involves normalization. All right, so let's see what the question is exactly. Okay, so to begin with, you are usually given a brief intro to the scenario or the situation. It is important to go over this scenario or the situation given because some important detail regarding your question might have been given in this scenario. Some standard settings sometimes, such as you know uh, setting up currencies, decimal places, time formats and stuff. So these types of things may have been given as a standard instruction at the top. So it is for this reason that it is important that we go over the brief or the intro that is given at the top to make sure that we do not miss out on anything important. So if you go over this, it says you work for Tawara Air and will create a database to analyze data about their flights from Tawara City Airport. Dates are to be displayed in the format this. So let's highlight this. This is the format in which dates are to be specified. All times are to be displayed in HH colon MM format. So you have been given a standard format for time as well, and are set to GMT, which is Greenwich Mean Time. So usually when your system settings are according to the GMT standards, so maybe we might not have to change anything here. Okay, you are required to provide evidence of your work, including screenshots at various stages. Create a document named center number underscore candidate number underscore evidence.rtf. And you have been given an example of that as well. So since in this question at different points, you would be required to produce some screenshot based evidence, which you will have to produce in a Word document. So he's asking you to create a Word document and save it with a certain name. So let's do that. I will open up Microsoft Word. So it has to be a blank document to begin with. We just have to save it with a certain name. And we will be later on using the same document to paste our screenshots. So what is the name that is to be given? Let's see. It has to be your center number, candidate number, and followed with the word evidence.rtf. So I'll go to File, click on Save, and of course I'll have to select a folder where I would like this file to be saved. So I'm going to go to the desired folder. In your case, of course, you will be selecting the folder where you would like to save this evidence. It is important that the name that you save your document with is exactly the one that has been given in the paper. So it has to be, well, let's go over it again, center number underscore candidate number and evidence. So maybe the center number that I'll put in a hypothetical one, maybe PK242, say for instance, underscore candidate number maybe 001, underscore evidence. And I will save it as a Word document. It does say that you have to save it as an RTF. So he in the paper he will use the term RTF because he cannot be specific to the type of a particular program. Since trade names are not to be used in the paper, when I say trade names, what I basically mean is you cannot be specific to the product of a particular company. So that is why we use generic terms or generic terminology. So he would say that you have to save it as an RTF, but we would know that RTF would mean that we have to save it as a Word document. So I'll keep it, Word document, and I'll click on save, and the document gets saved. Okay, so what's next? Next, it says place your name, center number, and candidate number in the header of your evidence document. So this is also standard practice. Whenever we produce certain documents or files in the paper, we are asked to put in our candidate details so that our documents can be identified. So I'm going to go to the document again. In this case, I'll go to insert, header, and since I need to put in 3 items of information, I will go with this 3-column option. In the left placeholder, I'll put in my name. In the center placeholder, I can put in the center number, which is hypothetically speaking, as I do say, is PK242, and maybe the candidate number is 001. So there you go. You have put in the header containing your candidate details. All right. So now, whenever, of course, you will save this document, or no matter how many pages this document may have, the information in the header will be shown, and of course, that is how your document will be uniquely identified, that it belongs to a particular candidate. Okay, moving on from here, we get down to step number 1 now. So what is step number 1? It says examine the data in the following files. So we have been given with these 4 files: N18 airport.csv, N18 cabin crew.csv, N18 crew code.csv, N18 flights.csv. So these are the 4 files that we have been provided with. Next, it says okay, Tawara Air or Air Tawara have decided that all field names must be short, meaningful, consistent in style, and contain no spaces. Now, this is a very important piece of information. Very important. Why is this important? Well, when it comes to deciding about the field names that we have to specify for our tables, we need to make sure that whatever naming convention that we use for our fields is consistent. Consistent in the way the field names uh, have been decided or are being used. So, when it says field names should be short, what he basically means is that you cannot have field names in the form of maybe a sentence. An example of that would be uh, ID of the customer, something like that, or number of the flight, number of crew members. These are lengthy. These are like in the form of kind of sentences. Excuse me. So quite a few connected words have to be short, meaningful. It could be 1 or 2 or maximum of probably 3 connected words, but it cannot be like in the form of a sentence. It cannot be lengthy. So as short and meaningful as possible. So that is one thing. Meaningful, I've already told you that the field name should be relevant to the type of data that you're storing in the field or the type of data that the field represents. So it has to be meaningful with respect to the type of data that you're storing it. Consistent in style. Now, what does that mean? You do know that in an access database table, field names cannot be separated by spaces. Either you have to write it all together, or the best, I would say, form of naming a field, or the best convention that you can use, is to make use of underscores. Okay, so say for instance, if I have a field named, say for instance, flight number, one way of writing it would be like this. I'll write it all together. That's one way of doing it. But this might not seem to be very, it might not be very easy to identify what the field is. So it would be better if I name it like this. I use an underscore in between. Now the underscore differentiates the two words being used very clearly. So having said this, if I'm using this underscore convention in naming my fields, then I have to make sure that on a consistent way, or in a consistent way, I follow the same convention of naming all the fields. Then it won't be like, in some cases I am using underscores, on other occasions I am, writing it in a joining way or whatever, right? So that is something that, what he means when he says that the field name should be consistent in style. All right, so you have to keep that in your mind. Moving on from here, next it says create a relational database normalized to the third normal form. Of course, using the data that is given in the tables. So, with a database question, that of course involves normalization to be done, and of course normalization to the third normal form. You cannot, start it, or you cannot get any idea of how to go about it until unless you first open up all the files given and inspect the data which has been given in the files, to get an idea of how the data is, which table contains which data, what is the structure of the files, or maybe you can think about it in your mind before you get to create it, that what structure would these tables have in particular. You will try to identify the relationships between the tables, all right, how various tables may be linked with each other. And of course, we cannot say that it is a single flat file to begin with. So he is not starting it from a point where you have been given a single flat file and you have been asked to normalize it to the third normal form. In this case, you have been given four files. This means that the data or the fields have been split in some sort of a logical way to start with. So we can straight away start from, after having inspected the tables, the files given, we can straight away start from uh, making sure that we normalize our database to the first normal form, and then see if there's a requirement of normalizing it to the second normal form, and then moving on to the third normal form. All right, so that's how it is. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open all these four tables, uh, I should say files, CSV files, because they will only be converted into tables once they have been imported. So I'm going to open up all these four files. By default, CSV files would open up in a spreadsheet program, and then we can together have a look at the data given. So let's open up the files. So it is N18 airports, cabin crew, crew code, and flights. All right. All four files open. Let's start from, let's quickly adjust the column widths so that we can have a proper view of all the files. Okay, fair enough. All right, so, well, all four files opened up in spreadsheet: cabin crew, airports, flights, and the crew code. Now, if we have a look at the crew code file, we could see that some crew codes have been given. One thing that you would notice here is that there's no label here. You cannot identify any data in any column that doesn't have a label. So we will have to put in a label here. That is something that we'll have to do. But looking at it, this is something that we realize for the time being. So I'll keep it in my mind, and I'll sort of move on to the next. Let's have a look at the flights table. Okay, so we have what, four fields here. We have flight number, departure on, departure at, arrival on, arrival at, and crew. These are the fields that we have been given in the flight table or in the flight file. Airports, there's flight number, there is airport or arrival airport code, and airport name. Lastly, we have cabin crew. Payroll number of employees who are air crew. Can this be a field name? It cannot be. So we could see that this would need changing. We have forename, surname, crew code, long service. Now, one more thing that we notice here as far as the field names are concerned, you could see that here the forename and the surname has been written together. I mean, you haven't split it in any way. It's like forename, surname, and probably that is how it is supposed to be written. But with crew code and long service, you could see that there's a space. And we are not supposed to leave spaces in field names. So we would be better off if, while importing, we make sure that these can be separated by an underscore. All right. And this will need shortening up. Okay, having seen this, what is it that we can make out of these files at the moment? So the first thing that we need to do is to try to normalize this to the first normal form. Now, what are the three key requirements for a database to be normalized to the first normal form? Do you people remember? Come on, you should remember that. Anyone, any one of them? So, well, you people should have revisited it, knowing that we were going to solve this paper today. Okay, so one is that there should not be any repeating groups of fields, let's put it that way. The data should be all atomic in fields. Fields should contain atomic data. Yes, there should be a unique key or a primary key in every table. These are the key requirements for a database to be normalized to the first normal form. So let's review these files, okay, keeping in mind the rules of the first normal form and see if these files obey those rules. To what extent do these files obey those rules, and what is it that we would like or we would have to basically change? Now, if I go to the flights table, well, do we have a key field here? Is there any field that we can set up as the primary key? You think that flight number can be set as the primary key? How about you people? Flight number? Okay. How can I check if there are no duplicates in flight number? There's an option in Excel that allows us to find out duplicates. So, well, what I can do is I can highlight this entire column right till the end. Okay. And then I can go to conditional formatting, cell highlight rules, duplicate values. And it highlights quite a bit. What does this mean? All these flight numbers have been duplicated. Yeah? And what does that mean? Can we then set up the flight number as a primary key? We cannot. Is there any other field that we can set up as a primary key? No, we cannot. Why? Because departure on can have repetitions. What if a flight departs on the same date? Departure at, what if the time is the same? Arrival and arrival on and arrival at could be same. There could be repetitions. Okay? And as well as the crew. If the flights are being repeated, this means that the crew would also be repeated. Yeah? So, in order to verify how flight codes are being or flight numbers are being repeated, let's see. It starts from what 80001. Yeah? Let's move on. Let's scroll downwards. It goes all the way up till, yeah, 80064, and then you could see that the repetition starts. 80001 comes again, and then 80002 comes again, and so on. And then it's repeated right up till this point, and then there's repetition again. So this is how we could easily see that all these flight codes are being repeated. Any idea why are they being repeated here? Anyone? All these flights would have departed and arrived on different dates. One flight does not depart and arrive only once. You know, the same flight can depart multiple times from the same airport, arrive at the destination, okay, at a certain time, and usually flights have fixed timings at which they operate, to certain destinations. So this is why flight number cannot be set up as a primary key. So we will have to see what can we do about this a little later. For the time being, we have identified that this cannot be set as the primary key. Now I'm going to go to uh, the crew code. Is the crew code unique? I believe it is. It is unique. Yeah, because almost all the crew codes are visible here. And I could see that the crew codes are not being repeated. So this can be set as a primary key because this is the only field and the data is unique. So means that we can set it up as a primary key. We will actually have to do it because this would later on be involved in relationships. This file will have to be related to some other tables later on. So what I need to do is I need to do a bit of a change to this file. I'll select all the unique crew codes. I'll move them a step downwards. Let me highlight it again. So I can wait. Let me highlight it again and move it one step down like this, and use the first cell for the label of this particular column. So I can name it crew underscore code, following the specific naming convention. So I'll save it like this so that later on when I'm importing it, my data has a label. If it doesn't have a label, it would give me an error while I import it because it would not have any identifier associated with this data. Yeah. Okay, moving on. So we have basically looked at two of the files for the time being. Now let's move on to the airports file. Okay, we could see that the arrival airport code is being repeated. We could see that the airport name is being repeated. Is the flight number being repeated here? Any idea? Is it? Let's see. It's not being repeated. Yeah. Starts from 80001 and ends up at 80064. That was the total number of flight numbers that we actually saw in the flights table. So here it is unique. Means what? That in the flights table, sorry, in the airports table, the flight number can be set up as a primary key. Okay, so this is done. Lastly, we have the cabin crew. Payroll of the employees who are aircrew. We will settle the field name later, but let's see if payroll numbers are unique here or not. Are payroll numbers unique? Well, we can use the same method to identify if they are unique or not. So let's highlight this entire column with all the data. Okay, once highlighted, I can go to conditional formatting, cell highlight rules or highlight cells rules, duplicate values. Okay, let's see if any of the cells has been highlighted. Well, there are no highlights. This means what? That the payroll number is unique. So we have found a primary key for the cabin crew table as well. All right. So one of the rules of normalizing the database to the first normal form has been catered for. We are left with one of the tables or one of the files where we still have to decide. But for all the rest of the three, we have decided which field can be set up as the primary key. Okay. How about data being atomic or non-atomic? Starting from this one, is all the data in all the fields atomic? Like there is no repeating data in any field? Or there actually every field only and only has one data item? Yeah? Okay, you see the name has been split. Remember when we were, looking at the basics of database normalization and we were talking about what is meant by atomic data, we discussed that uh, names usually need to be split up into forename and surname, or maybe the first name and the last name. So it is like that. So here all the data is atomic. Let's check it up in the airports table. Is the data atomic? It is. Of course, airport name is the airport name, so we cannot split it up. Moving on, is the data in the flights table all atomic? It is. Yeah, we do not have more than one data items for any field. And lastly, well, here of course the crew code is there. It is a single data item, so it is all atomic. So we have looked at all the four files for the time being, and we could see that the data which is contained in the files is atomic. So we have taken care of two things. One is uh, a unique field to go with every record structure in every file, and the data is atomic. Are there any repeating groups of fields or not? We will have a look at that a bit later. Okay, but for the time being, we still have one file to settle. Yeah, one file to settle in terms of as to where can we or how can we actually set up a unique field that would help us identify every flight uniquely in the flights table. So, what do you think I should do? Any idea? How can we make every record in the flights table unique? Well, of course, that is, that is what we are trying to do. But how would we set up a primary key if we could see that the flight in the flight number field, the flight numbers are being repeated? Create a new field, and what could that field be? Okay, did you listen to what he's saying? He's saying that one of the solutions could be to create a new field, name it differently, and it should have uh, every record identified as maybe uniquely 1 2 3, like you have that auto number field in access, where if you do not set up a primary key, access would add a default primary key with the name id, and it would put in auto numbers in it, incrementing it by one every time. So it will start from one, then two, three, four, and that's how every record could be given a unique identification. This could be one of the solutions. So he's right. This could be one of the solutions. Could there be any other solution here? There's one important concept that you're missing here, which we discussed when we were discussing database normalization. Do you remember we discussed something called a composite key? Remember that? Can we work with this somehow here? Could there be a case where we combine more than one fields together, set up a composite key that would give uniqueness to every record if one field cannot be used to uniquely identify? Okay, so if you believe that could be done, can you identify how could that be done? Okay, you're saying that well, you can have the flight number included and flight number and crew. Crew is being repeated as well. Okay, don't you think that there should be something in terms of identifying a flight which is more important than the crew? Because even the crew might change. Crew also might change. Okay, so you people just said that maybe if we can create a composite key on flight number, depart on, departure on, and departure at. If we set up a compound key on these three fields, do you think that would give uniqueness to every single record? What if it would? Because if you look at the flight number, departure on, and departure at, this would be unique to every single record. A particular flight departuring on a certain date, okay, would have a certain time of departure. At a different date, the same flight would be departing at a different time. So if we combine these three fields together, and make a composite key out of it, like we combine this, and this, and make a composite key on these, this would give every record uniqueness. Having said this, both these solutions are there. One of the solutions is to set up a composite key, and the other is, the one that you said, which is a simpler solution. Why? Because why do I say it is a simpler solution? Because later on in the third normal form, we would not have to actually, yeah, I mean, not in the third normal form, but actually, in the second normal form, we would not have to worry about, composite keys and partial key dependencies. If we go with the composite key, solution, then we would also have to worry about or think about if there are no partial key dependencies. Yeah. So if we go by the solution that you said, whereby we could create a new field, a single field that we could use to identify every record uniquely, we would not have to actually then go with the other type of solution where we have to create a composite key, because that would just make matters a little more complex, because as I said, later on I'll have to also think in terms of partial key dependencies if there's a composite key. So why not go with the simpler solution? Having said this, both options are available. You can use either of them. So is it clear till this point? Yeah.